All right. I am here with Mike. Mike, how are you?
I am doing great today. How are you doing, Royce?
I am good. Thank you for being here. Now, there's a lot to unpack, so let's just slow down. I'm talking to the listeners. You have been working for the Walt Disney Company for 2 decades-ish?
Yeah, I just came past my 20th anniversary with the company this past September.
Okay. And I will say this, and you can reiterate that any opinions expressed here in this podcast are solely yours and not those of the Walt Disney Company.
Correct. I'm definitely not representing the company today.
With that being said, let's talk about it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I want to mention really quick, we've known each other since about the age of 12.
Yeah, 12 years old.
And we used to do theater lighting together at Frenchwoods Festival during the summers.
We did lighting, carpentry. We did a whole lot of stuff.
And I always remember growing up saying if all else failed, I'd move. You actually did it long before I ever did. And then we were spending some time today, which is what we're going to get into in a moment here on the podcast. We're spending some time today doing some stuff. But I almost forgot we went to the same college, too.
We did, and we were talking about this earlier. We went to the same college, and I don't think either of us realized the other one was there while we were there.
But we knew we went to the same college. I just don't think we realized we were there at the same time. So, yeah,
Right.
Point being is, and then on top of that, we live down the street from each other now. So we don't even
What did
really.
you actually major in while you were there?
Communications.
Okay, and I was theater. So we were like one building over from each other your entire career.
But I was always over there because I was filming dance videos because my girlfriend was in dance at Delphi, and I was working with Pete and Mike to do stuff for film because we built a rain machine for my short film.
And I was always probably in the booth or in the shop building the stuff that you asked Pete and Mike to build for you.
Now, Jonathan Larson went to Adelphi.
He did, the writer of Rent.
Correct. Chuck D from Flava Flav also went to Adelphi.
He did.
Baba Booey from The Stern Show went to Adelphi. And you went to Adelphi.
There's been some great graduates, and then there was me, yes.
Yes. So let's start. Now that we're at the bottom, let's start there.
Well, thanks for that one.
No, you would have not missed that opportunity in a reverse situation.
No. Yeah, I just wasn't quick enough to come back with the comeback for you.
Well, it's late in the day, which brings me to where I was headed next, because you have actually been helping me. You know, we actually really have not seen each other a lot in recent time, but lately we've been able to connect because you're helping me do some stuff. And then I asked you if you had seen the new shows in studios because I was just raving to you about them.
Correct.
And you actually worked on which one?
Well, so when I came to Hollywood, or I guess at that time it was MGM Studios, in 2007. So I'd already been working with the company for just over 2 years. I started working for the company in started working for the park in 2007. And Voyage of the Little Mermaid was one of the first shows I learned as a technician, which closed during COVID and it just recently reopened as the new show, the musical adventure. I don't remember. What's the exact title of it? I don't want to get it wrong.
The new show.
The new show. Yes.
That's what we're going to call it. The new show.
The new show.
The musical Little Mermaid, the musical adventure, something like that.
Something like that.
When you say you learned the original show, you ran the show? You sat back at the booth and ran it?
Yeah. So the original show took, without giving away too many of the secrets of the show, it actually took 5 technicians per performance to operate. And I knew all 5 of those positions.
How many shows a day? Do you remember?
The show would do, at peak season, 34 performances a day.
Wow.
With 3 crews. So, yeah, it was a busy day. It was about 9 minutes between shows.
I don't think they're doing 34 of the new show, are they?
I think they're close to it. I want to say they're in the high 20s.
Okay. So this is what interests me. Long before I ever lived here, you have been working for the company, which means you've seen several iterations of something like The Little Mermaid and many other things. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that real quick, some of the things you worked on, but then I want to get your reaction to the new shows, because one of the things we did today is you had not seen the new Little Mermaid show.
No, I'd been to the park a couple times since it opened, and the wait times were either astronomical or with it being a new show, that's always a good sign. Or unfortunately, there was one day when the show was just down due to I believe it was due to technical difficulties. So I did not get a chance to see the new Mermaid show. I did get to see the villain show at that time, which I know we'll talk about later in this podcast.
But I have not even gotten your reaction from the Mermaid show. We're saving it for this. And
yeah, we very intentionally did not talk about any of it walking out of the theater or coming back to the studio.
No, and in fact, in the downtime between then and now, we built a second AI Muppet because you were like, you saw the Miles and you were like, I need one of these. So I guess we built a Maya technically.
Yes, we've been building my my animatronic Muppet that we'll see how it goes when we try to get Miles and Maya to talk to each other.
That'll be fun. I digress. Or you digress. We both digress.
The ADD.
Talk to me briefly before we get into these two shows, which is really where I'd like to spend most of our time because I really want to go down the tech rabbit hole with you. But talk to me just broadly without getting yourself into trouble. Beyond the Little Mermaid, where you were trained, talk to me about some of the things you've worked on throughout the years.
So, give you the short, not so short. The Disney resume.
And your Perner number.
00, that's about as far as you're getting.
That's the combination on my luggage.
Yes. Coming soon to a theater near you, 2 more years, I think?
It's to Amazon, but still.
Yeah. Is it Amazon?
Amazon's producing Spaceballs
too, yeah. So I got hired for literally, I answered an ad for new Disney experience in New York City. That was all the information I had was Disney was doing something in New York City. They needed a technician. And I worked for 2.5 years on Fifth Avenue doing the Cinderella's Princess Court show. It was a small show inside the World of Disney store.
Oh, wow.
World of Disney Orlando opened a branch in New York City literally on the corner of 5th and 55th Street. So we were right between the Trump Towers and the St. Regis Hotel.
Okay.
Those were our neighbors. And we did that show about 4 times a day, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then we had character meet and greets in the theater between the shows. So different characters would come and visit us from the parks, and they'd get to meet the guests up in New York.
This was right out of college?
This was right out of college. I graduated college in May, June is when colleges graduate, and started in September. So
now, was that through, not to get too inside baseball, was that something Emmy helped you get?
No, that was strictly answered an ad on monsters.com. If anyone remembers that, I guess it's sort of a job company, they just job listing company.
Sure. I always thought that she helped you. I'll let you continue the story, but I always thought she helped you get your way into the company.
No. And ironically, as you and I were talking about Adelphi, a good friend of mine, Colleen, who graduated my senior year of college, she was my freshman year, she was a senior. On our first day, we were filling out all our paperwork, and she was sitting next to me. She was the full-time customer on the gig, and I was the full-time technician on the show. So it was very funny, and another Adelphi connection to Disney and the two of us. But
it's what we call a small world.
It's a small world after all.
Go on.
I don't want to sing the whole song.
Oh,
no.
I like that she knew I wasn't talking about the story, but the song. That's how long we've known each other. But continue with your resume.
So did that. And then after about 2.5 years of there, I transferred to the parks. And what was kind of cool is when I worked up in New York, I was technically statused to Pleasure Island. So I was working for the Disney parks, not for Disney Store.
That's very cool. That's a good in.
It was a great in. And a lot of those connections that I had up there followed through because since we were part of them, it followed through. Going through, I came down to Hollywood Studios where I got to learn, or I was put on Voyage of the Little Mermaid. Also, because of when I started, if anyone remembers the old ESPN The Weekends, I did that pretty much right after getting my job down in the parks. From there...
Now, was that like a kid in a candy store moment coming down to the parks and working here at first glance?
I don't know if it was kid in a candy store, but it was definitely a holy cow moment.
Yeah.
To I guess sidetrack for a moment, I got to see my first Broadway show when I was in third grade. It was Peter Pan, and all I cared about, I don't remember this that well. My parents tell me this all the time, is I was looking at all the technical stuff constantly.
Right.
The first time I was ever at Disney World, I was 3 or 4 years old, and loved the place. And sometime around middle school, I realized that my love for Disney and my love for theater could be one and the same. And then as I went to high school and college, the decision was sort of made without necessarily realizing I made it, that I will be working for Disney in theater. And then I guess I just kind of willed it. Got the job in New York, transferred down to the parks. From the parks, did that. And then I don't remember the order that I learned shows, but ended up doing Indiana Jones, Fantasmic.
What did you do in Indiana Jones?
Indiana Jones, I was one of the techs walking around on the stage. I helped push the ball up that ramp.
I didn't know that.
I had to help move those carts around on stage.
I'm finding this out for the first time.
Did you not know that? I could have sworn we've talked about
Were
this.
you one of the technicians inside the ball?
There's no one in the ball.
What?
But I was one of the people who pushed the ball up.
Imagine if I believe that.
Yeah.
I just got to clarify for people out there. Be like, he really, I'm
literally sitting here looking for things to throw at him as he makes these comments.
Why? Anyway, I'm not even going to let that derail me. So why did I not know that? That is so much fun. That's the early. I mean, that's not opening days, but that's still early days of that show.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana Jones was supposed to be an open day attraction, and because of the technology in it, it opened, I want to say 2 or 3 months after the park. I don't remember the dates off the top of my head.
How close would you say that show is today from when you worked on it in terms of mechanics and effects and all of this?
From when I worked on it, there's been a lot of changes to it, but as far as the technology behind the show, as much as that, I'd say it's pretty close. That show has not gotten much of a technology update, which honestly I love. It's an outdated show, but at the same time, that's the charm of that show.
I agree.
That it doesn't use the highest technology. It uses a technology that was around when the movies were filmed. It's showing how the movies were done. It's not showing how we would do it if we filmed it in 2025.
Did you ever get to run down the track and have the ball roll over you like you're Indiana Jones?
I did run down the track several times. I never had the ball following me.
Oh.
I did have one day where I had some fun. I ran chasing the ball. For safety reasons, only the stunt guys got to have the ball behind them.
It's still a heavy ball.
It is. It's about 600 pounds of
I know.
rubber.
I've seen the show this week.
So,
but that's so cool to me. Like this is the thing. Is like I'm seriously excited to know. I did not. You've probably told me, but I usually and we'll get to it. But I usually hone in on Fantasmic.
Right. And I got a chance to work on Fantasmic. I don't. In fact, the sad part of Fantasmic, I was there the day. I remember the night we got the note that Disney World will be closing due to COVID, and then doing that last performance before we shut down,
right? And
powering down everything, going, well, we'll see you in 2 or 3 weeks, and almost a year later, we got the show up and running again. I unfortunately did not get to learn the new show because I transferred to Epcot, but did get to take apart the old show, and that's always a fun show to operate and get to see. I know you're going to ask questions about that, but other shows I got to do, which were a lot of fun: Lights, Motors, Action, Beauty and the Beast, lots of events. Like if you can think of the event, I probably had my hands in it, from Star Wars weekends, ESPN the weekends, Super Soap weekends, Rad Nights, One Mighty Parties.
But how does this work as a technician? You basically are in there to do, let's say you started on Little Mermaid, and then they say, hey, we need some more bodies over at here. Do you want to transfer?
So we are
because it's just for the sake of the audience, it's entertainment.
Correct.
So it's not the same way where if you work on Big Thunder Mountain, you work on Big Thunder Mountain unless you're cross-trained on Space Mountain.
Correct. So entertainment is a very different department than any other department on property. The way it works for technicians, I know it's a little different for characters and then very different once you leave entertainment. But for technicians, we are statist, or homed as we call it, to a park. So originally I was Hollywood Studios, or MGM Studios, which became Hollywood Studios. And then from there, they teach you one or two shows. And then as you progress, as the need happens, you start learning multiple shows. The other thing that is different is with technicians, whereas like you brought up Big Thunder Mountain. So let's talk about Big Thunder Mountain for a minute. When you get trained on every position for that show or for that attraction. With shows, you get the technicians for, I'll use Mermaid, Voyage Little Mermaid as the example. As I said, there's 5 positions. You get trained on one. Usually 2 or 3 weeks later, you'll get trained on a second position. And then from there, you may or may not get trained on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th position, because you may go to another show and learn 2 or 3 positions there.
So it's more about if you know the board and you know how to run that, then it's just a matter of going to a show and running different cues.
Yes and no. Every show uses different technology. It uses different equipment. So just because you can operate a lighting console at one show doesn't mean you run it at another. Disney uses a lot of show control systems, not just lighting and audio systems. So very often it's one computer that's triggering the cues for lighting, audio, video, and so forth. And we use different show control systems as well.
But I'm curious, what would be the thing? Because one of the things I think that is lost on most folks, Disney literally encourages its cast members at Disney World to try new things. But it sounds like in the case of your career with the company, like trying new things, like that was out of the gate. You didn't have to go searching for it. It would come to you because of the nature of being in entertainment.
I definitely lucked out. I wouldn't say necessarily because of the nature of entertainment, although that is a part of it. The biggest thing with Disney is there's probably 1,000,001 opportunities available. Unlike a lot of companies, when a promotion's available, when stuff like that, they don't come out and tell you, hey, this promotion's available. They post it. It's on a bulletin board. It's on the cast member websites, that kind of thing. You have to go after them. Disney is very big on encouraging. Of course, your management team, your leadership team, like any job, like any department, you could have good managers, bad managers, good leaders, not so great leaders. So I had lucked out. I had some not so great leaders, but I had more great leaders and not who encouraged me and helped me progress. Even to the point we were talking earlier before we started recording, Disney got me my master's degree. They have a program that it started a couple of years ago, and it's great. And
is that what's that, Inspire?
It's called Disney Aspire.
Aspire.
ASPIRE. Mm-hmm. And basically, there is several pages of different majors you can do. Everything from getting a GED to associate's degrees, bachelor degrees, and master's degrees. And they say it's 100% free. I will say it's almost 100% free. When I say that, I got my master's degree. It cost me $100.
It's crazy.
So I got a master's degree for about $100 because the program covers everything that's required. It did not cover the cost of getting my official transcripts transferred, which was just a few dollars. And then there was a few textbooks that were recommended but not required. They didn't cover that. So I bought a few books on my own money. But for the most part, all my required textbooks they bought. And it's great because I've watched people who, in some departments, who came in with just their GED.
Right.
That was their highest level of education. And they now have college diplomas. Thank you to Disney. And what's great is the company does not require it to be a part of your job, meaning the degree does not have to relate to your current or future job positions. And I believe it is still accurate to say there is no reason you have to stay. So as soon as you get the degree, it's not like you're indentured to the company for X amount of years afterward or anything like that.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because so it kind of cuts in two different directions. One side of that is, so now they're setting you up to get a degree, so now you're going to leave and go on and get a better job. But I think the other side of it is, well, I'm here, they're paying for it,
right?
And it's part of the value of being in the company. Now I have this thing, but like the other side of this, in a guy like in your situation, is there's really no reason for the company to ever let you go, and there's no reason for you to ever leave the company.
Right.
It's a really good fit. So what do you think the value of you getting that degree is for you personally?
Well, this is where I have no proof, and I say that I'm speaking under my own opinions and not for the company, is I believe, A, it looks good for the company, right? Because now they can hire in people with a GED, and in a couple of years, they have college degrees, even possibly a master's degree, and they can advertise that, like, look at the education, look how we're helping all of our cast members. I'm sure that is a part of it. Like I said, these are just my opinions, but also I was competing to move up. I had moved up quite a bit within the company, but to get to the next level, I was competing with people who were being hired in with a master's degree.
Right.
I now have that master's.
True.
Disney helped me get that, which also then got me the next promotion.
It's kind of remarkable that they actually offer that.
Right. And the job that I'm currently have as one of the lead techs for an area is not, there's no master's degree required. It's not in the job description or anything else. But I will say, there's X amount of people who applied for that job as me. I will guarantee that put me ahead of some of those people.
But that's
did
fantastic.
It get me the job? Probably not. But it definitely was one of those things like, oh, he's got a master's. And I think it helps instill loyalty to the company, honestly.
That's what I was thinking too, because now what it's helping is it's allowing you to remain competitive within the company so that you can grow, as opposed to being outpaced by somebody that has a degree, and because you're locked up within the company, now you can't get one. So it frees you. The company is large enough that it's like you can have a whole nother career within the company.
Oh, yeah. And I've watched people, and I was training someone the other day who spent years in another department and got the education to be able to transfer into our department into entertainment, and is now, thriving, or hopefully will be thriving. They've only been with us a few weeks, to move up, and get other different jobs. Some departments, just moving into the department is looked at as a promotion. I don't know if that's looked at as the company in any way, but I know people look at, like, I'd love to promote into your department. It's like, we're all frontline cast. We're no better than another department or anything else. The show, the parks don't operate unless we're all working in hand to hand.
But we all know that, like any company, that's always, always nice on paper.
Right. And I would say this, again, just as my opinion, while no department is necessarily more important than other departments, there's more desirable jobs than certain jobs are more desirable to others.
But that
goes both by social status, I think, to a point, but also just what people want to do.
But this goes back to that laundry list of attractions and shows you just rattled off, because that's not even all of them. And I'm like, that is a lot of things to touch. In 20 years is a long time.
It is.
But also, not to touch that many things. That's a lot of ground you've covered.
Yeah.
And that's not everything. Did you do illuminations?
I did not do illuminations. As far as fireworks shows go, I touched Wishes every now and then, as well as Happily Ever After over at Magic Kingdom. I was never really on those shows.
When you say touch, we talking pyro, projections?
Pyro. I learned and was trained to load the pyro for the shows.
Yeah.
I was almost never on them. I did do Not So Scary and the Very Merry fireworks a little bit more often than the standard Wishes or Happily Ever After.
Can we talk about pyro systems for a quick second? You can tell me
broadly.
No. Yeah. Well,
broadly.
I know. Okay. So there's not a guy firing these things off like it's 4th of July barbecue in your uncle's backyard. This is all computer controlled. I think that's
Correct.
fair to say.
Yeah. There's definitely no one running around with a match or a lighter.
Right. But from a design perspective, and this is something I don't think I've ever asked you personally, so if you can't get into this, that's fine. But I've always wanted to know this. If I'm designing the show, I'm basically sort of like you would do with like lighting and dimmers in software. I'm creating virtual firework dimmers, for lack of a better phrase, channels, and then running a virtual show in a system first before I ever hook it up to real fireworks.
So from what I understand, I'm not a fireworks designer. I've worked,
and we're talking broadly in terms of how this tech works.
And to even be honest with you, I can talk from what I've seen.
Right.
I'm not in the design department, and I'm definitely not in the fireworks design.
But what
team.
but what I want to be clear about is you're not You don't go out there and go, well, I hope it works. By the time you're loading up those cannons,
there is a little bit of, I hope this works, for sure.
but
And
isn't that anything in tech?
what's that?
That's
Yes.
anything in tech.
And for any of your listeners who live in the Orlando area, probably within like 45 minutes of the park, I am sure whenever new shows come out, you've seen those notices on social media, or right before major events. You've seen some of those notices on social media where Walt Disney fireworks, testing or rehearsals will be in progress from midnight to 2 a.m. or
listen,
whatever the announcement
you need to tell somebody to start posting those on the Ring doorbell app, because there's a lot of confused people out there that think Disney accidentally set off fireworks in the middle of the night. So, but to just go back to this broadly, so the idea that you can basically have a digital firework that shows just like a digital light would in like a lighting array in a interface, so I can actually watch a whole digital fireworks show in the computer before I ever see the real ones.
Yeah, so they build it in 3D essentially. They build it and the programs, from what I've been told, again, not being proficient in that so much,
right?
They listen to the music, they know where they want the firework to explode, and then they say this firework explode here, and then the computer knows the math because we pre-program it ahead of time.
Well, you'd be like, this is this type of cannon, or this is this type of whatever.
Type of firework takes this long from launch, blah blah blah, and it knows, well, if I want it to explode here, it's got to launch here.
Right.
We then, or the design team then, has to figure out in which tube each firework, or what pins, or however they program it, where that fireworks is essentially connected to on the computer, and so they know which fireworks it's going to be. Then they have to tell it where it's going to be firing from.
But if you were doing a new show, you put new cannons out in different positions and things like this. In other words, it's not just like a permanent grid for a show.
They custom build everything.
This might be too boring for some people, but I'm just personally interested because I'm thinking of water slide and roller coaster design. Water slide in particular, water slide design is one of those things where, despite all the math, you get to a point where there's trial and error. And so when I'm looking at a fireworks show or even a drone show, I'm like, okay, you can do so much of that in the computer before you get to the real world. And you're like, well, we didn't factor that in.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, so because of whatever this variable may be, now we got to go back and zhuzh it. And water slides are that way. They'll literally build it.
In fact, to step off Disney for a second, one of my favorite things, I got to go to Volcano Bay, Universal's water park, that park that's down the road, a few weeks before the official grand opening. And they use a company called ProSlide to design a lot of their water slides. And I remember walking around the park with my wife and kid, and at the bottom of almost every slide, there was someone in a ProSlides t-shirt with their feet in the pool and a laptop on their lap. And you could see them typing things into the laptop. And seconds after they typed, you'd see the water change, how fast it was come down the slide and stuff.
Oh, that's cool. But I'm even talking about like the curvatures and the drops and the dips, where they're like, oh, we put a bunch of sandbags in a slide, and the slide it overshoots the.
Yeah, and that's where it gets real expensive, because.
But that's part of
tracks,
this.
Especially, if it's not right, it's not like you can just go into the computer and change it a little bit. Now, there's a little bit of, we can speed the water up if the tubes aren't making it. We could slow it down if they're overshooting or hitting too fast with speed. But if an angle is creating too many G-forces, or, is too sharp or something, you have to start redesigning and remanufacturing. And that's.
Did you ever watch Extreme Water Slides?
I have.
That's what I'm thinking of right now, because it's so all of that to say, it's kind of the same. Even you can only do so much, even if you can do it all. You can still only do so much with the computer, and you have to have that reality check. So when it comes to a show like Phantasmic, or it comes to a fireworks show, that's got to be done in the middle of the night. You can't do it during the day. So you worked on Phantasmic. Let's use this as an example. If you guys wanted to trial anything, or let's say you're having, because I saw the other night a water jet was having issues. It was going off like before the show started. If you want to attack any of that stuff, you got to wait till the park is empty, or at least the theater is empty, right? And then you're working in the middle of the night, and obviously you have the benefit of turning on lights, but you're still working in the dark of night.
Yes.
Troubleshooting. And I think that's also one of these things that's lost on the guest.
Yeah. So Phantasmic, ironically, is probably the best show when something goes wrong, as far as maintenance goes. because it's in a theater, meaning we can work on it during the day. We can't shoot fireworks off during the day.
Right.
First of all, one thing we have to remember is, yes, it's Disney. Yes, we own miles of property, but every show has a permit. The permits have to be renewed every certain amount of time.
Interesting.
And the permit has a window in which we're allowed to fire the fireworks. So whether it's rehearsal, whether it's testing, whatever, we can only fire the fireworks at a certain time from a certain location. Everything's very much within that permit, and there's very little variance.
Can a marshal pull that permit at the last minute?
Yes.
Okay. So I've experienced that in the world of television, doing like Macy's fireworks on like the barge, and they would like hold you to the last second just to F with you.
Yeah. And again, speaking for my own personally, and I have seen not the permit get pulled, but when it was Riddick Creek, and then after all of the political stuff when it became the district, most of the stuff in park did not change much. Most of that stuff was more on the top end on the government side, not in park.
So if a show gets delayed heavily, I know we're kind of talking Fantasmic, but let's just talk fireworks for a second. If a show gets delayed heavily, then those permits need to slide and get approval?
Yes, but their permits have a window. So it's not like, well, Fantasmic is a great example, right? They do a show, what is it, at 9 and 10:30. I don't remember the exact
Not
show
enough.
But let's call it those.
You don't have to comment on that, but they don't do that enough. They only seem to do. Why do they only do the 10:30 show when it's not a good time? Is the 10:30 show designed for training? Can you answer that?
No.
Okay.
It is, but I will say it is not an easy thing to do multiple shows in a day on that show.
Mickey gets a union break.
Yes, our Mickey and all of his friends get their break. Resetting that show, recleaning that theater, getting the guests out and back in. It is a monumental task that, on the technical side, I will say we get a lot done very quickly. This is where I have to give our operations, our food and beverage partners, a lot of credit to get those theaters clean, reset.
Oh yeah,
to restock all the food stands. I mean, Fantasmic seats. I do
10,000.
It's somewhere between 9 and 10,000 people.
I think it's 10,000 with standing is what they say, but I don't know.
When I originally learned the show, I can tell you it was 10,000. I know that number has changed. I don't know the exact number when they moved a lot of stand room to extra benches and they reworked some of the benches.
Have you ever made a new guy count the crowd?
Have I ever made? No. But the crowds are counting. We get pretty accurate numbers from every show every night.
So I want to get back to the permit thing, but real quick.
The permits have a window of several hours.
Okay.
So when a show gets delayed for an hour or so.
So if there's a weather issue, there's a forgive.
Yeah. So shows can begin up to a certain thing, and the permit is time the show begins.
Oh, okay.
So
you have the window for the show to begin, and then you have the window once the show begins, essentially.
Right. I can't talk specifics about the window.
Understood.
But let's say it's a 2-hour window.
Right.
So let's say the show begins at 8, is scheduled at 8 o'clock. I believe, again, let's just, for argument's sake, say it's a 2-hour window, they can start the show up till 10 o'clock.
But I do
and then they know the show's 20 minutes. So they know that even if we start at 10 o'clock on the dot, it's not going to go past 10:20. So
we're still in your window.
There's, and a lot of that permit comes down to noise variances as well, because the neighborhoods in the area can still hear the fireworks. The hotels can hear the fireworks. So we don't want to run shows too late. And then things like July 4th, New Year's Eve, those get their own permits that have their own windows because it's not the normal show. But also it's outside of our normal windows.
See, this is the stuff that interests me because, well, it all interests me. But when you're talking about having like a sliding window, and then you're talking about
it's not so much a sliding window. There's a
sliding
window.
If it's weather.
Well, it's not even sliding. It's when we apply for the permit at whatever point in the year we have to apply for it. There's a team that deals with that. The permit says the show cannot begin before this time, and it cannot end. It cannot begin after this time. Doesn't matter if it's weather. Doesn't matter whatever. Right. This is the window in which you can run the show.
But when I notice that they do like the 15-minute delays that stack and stack and stack, it's almost like they're like, look, and this is just my opinion, and I'm just pontificating, but it's almost like they always are trying to get the show off because one way or another they got to fire off those cannons. So It's like if we got the people here and we're ready to do the show.
You have to remember a couple things. One is Phantasmic or Luminous, another great example. Happily Ever After. Those shows end the park night. So let's talk. We've been talking Phantasmic. We'll talk Phantasmic. We're saying the theater holds somewhere between 9 and 10,000 people. If it's a full theater, you have between 9 and 10,000 people sitting there. The park closes at 9 o'clock. The show is at 9 o'clock. Now, I'm sure everyone is taking that tram in, or the monorail, or this whatever. Yes, I know you don't take the monorail to Hollywood Studios.
I know.
But
I was going to let it go, but I heard them saying
it. But what the friendship boats in whatever it is, and they tell you as you come into the park, the park closes at 9 o'clock. Our last shuttle out will be at 10:30. Well, if that show runs 40 minutes late, we have to extend all those transportations 40 minutes.
Right.
We have to extend operations, security, everybody, all those cast members now are being extended. So there's
and then that affects park close, and then it's all the third shift people that are waiting to go do preventative maintenance that are now on ice.
So there's all these sort of it's the domino effect.
I guess that's what I meant by the sliding thing.
Yeah.
Was that every time you do that 15 minutes, even though you're trying to get the show done, that 15 minutes plus 15 plus 15 just has this ripple.
Right. And of course, with fireworks, fireworks are safe if you know how to handle and take care of them. But the more you handle them, the higher your risk factor of something happening is going to be. So once we load those fireworks, we don't want to go out there and unload them.
No, you want to fire them.
So now we have a few options. If we have to actually cancel a show, do we fire them for the empty theater? Well, if we do that, we upset all the guests who now hear those fireworks going off that were told there's going to be no show.
Right.
Or do we go out there and take them all and put them back in the...
which is way too dangerous.
Well, it's not so dangerous, but if I can go out to the fireworks, that means it's safe. Why wasn't I able to fire them off? Because you can't get to the biggest reason we have to down or cancel shows is weather, because you can't be within the fireworks if there's weather within a certain distance and all that kind of stuff. There's all these rules. But if I can go out there and strike them. So then if that's not the case, then you have to pay someone to babysit them all night, because if they're loaded in the tubes, there has to be what we call a pyro watch.
Right.
So someone literally has to sit in the theater and watch it.
So somebody just decides which way you're going to go, depending on the night?
There's a sort of a team that makes that decision. The entertainment duty manager of the night, the show's manager, and there are, to help all that and to make sure that no one gets in trouble, there are guidelines that those managers have. I don't know what they are. The lead techs on the shows have a little bit of say. They don't necessarily have a lot of say on it. But
it's got to be a case by case scenario. Because I mean, let's say there are 2 shows for Phantasmic. Well, then we'll just do the 10:30.
Right.
Now I've been up to, and I want to talk about the 10:30 show, and then I got to get to these other 2 shows. So real quick before we get to the 10:30 time slot, the thing with Phantasmic, so they'll do 2 shows and they have to reset everything, right? So they got to go out there at the end. I know, because right away, as soon as the show's over, they're racing around and they're doing all that. Let's cover this 10:30 thing real quick. Can you shed light on why they would do a 10:30 show, like strategically? Can you give me any information on that? Because it doesn't seem to be based off of the crowds.
That's always what I was told it was. But you are right. Sometimes it doesn't seem based off crowd.
Right.
But from what I understand, 2 show nights are based on projected crowd levels.
Interesting. Because
don't know if that is the truth,
right,
or if that's just what we're told.
So just now, this goes back to crowd management, because you're talking about the end of the night and the trams and all this. So I've been there and seen a weather situation unfolding that looked like the show was going to get canceled, but I've seen them load the theater only to turn around and cancel it. Like they purposely moved all these people up to the theater so they could have them exit out the back. Like it was almost like, and maybe you can't comment on this, but it almost seemed to me like, we know that this show isn't going to go on tonight. Let's load the theater so that we can redirect these people out the back door. It's a lot easier than trying to clear Sunset.
If I will say from my experience, and I can't say this is always the truth, but I can say from my experience, if they know they're not doing the show, they will not load the theater.
So that could have just been sort of like we're on the bubble.
Yeah, my guess is we sit and we watch the radars very carefully. Disney has their own weather stations on property. We get the weather. So, when we get the local weather, there are meteorologists that work for Disney. They send us they send our management teams weather reports and projected weather and everything else.
Well, the CEO is literally a weatherman, so we've got really good sources.
So that's true. Bob Iger did start as a weatherman, didn't he?
He commented on it.
But but yeah, and
you're gonna love your new job at Universal.
but think about this as well. Fantasmic is a big mountain.
Yeah.
With metal benches and a huge metal truss in the theater.
So why would you want to play with that?
If we know there's lightning in the area, we are not loading that theater because A, we don't want to put any guests in danger, and B, nobody from our cast wants to be out there.
Look, sometimes I get caught up in the conspiracies because everyone's always looking for the drama, and part of what I do, because everything's so overexposed, everybody starts to sort of write the narrative because there's so much of it and everyone's over-consuming. So I'm always looking for it. I'm like, why are they doing the 10:30? Why would you load us? But the people that night, they were so mad.
Yeah,
because they loaded everybody.
I think part of the issue that people don't understand is we have weather rules. And unfortunately, in fact, you and I were talking about this in the car earlier as we watched the wall of water, as we were sitting at a red light and watched the wall of water coming at us from the rain, something that I've only ever seen in Florida. The weather could be within that bubble, but not in the park. So,
and you're trying to put a show on. So you
at Hollywood Studios, it might be blue skies, but Magic Kingdom could be in the middle of a downpour with thunder and lightning, and that lightning is within the bubble that we're not allowed to be too close to the pyro, or we can't do something.
But you also have a window for loading the theater.
Correct.
So at a certain point, like if we're going to do this show, we got to get these people up there.
Yeah.
And if we're not going to do this show,
and that's where we start looking at the management and operations has to start making decisions and look.
Now
and
that
go,
makes sense.
All right, which way is this moving? How fast is it moving? Are we going to load? Or are we not going to load? Are we going to do? Because if we don't load, then there's no chance of doing the show. If there's a greater than X percentage, then let's load the theater because, So
this is the perfect transition because we were standing in line for the Little Mermaid.
Correct.
And I was telling you how I overheard a guy the other day going, how do they not know that the show? Because they were on the bubble.
Right.
And the guy's like, how do they not know if they could do a show in the next 10 minutes? And I'm thinking it's probably because like they're having a boot issue or something's not syncing, hardware, software communication issues. It's not like an actor, who nobody knows where's Flounder, Flounder hasn't clocked in. By the way, I don't think Flounder drives, but that's a different story. So we're in line getting ready to watch The Little Mermaid, and I'm laughing to you because I'm like, do you know how many things can stop a show? And in this particular case, because unlike Fantasmic, you're not going to load the Little Mermaid theater until you know you're doing the show. Fantasmic's an amphitheater. It's a very different beast. So everyone's standing outside, and they don't know. They did the show, though, right? Mm-hmm. It was up to the last minute they did the show. Right. But it was just funny that how do they not know? And I'm thinking, how do you not know how they don't know? But this is why tech is tech. It's not for everybody, and not everyone's going to understand it. So let's talk Little Mermaid now, because this is where I want to go a little deep. And again, if you don't understand it, you don't understand it. And if we pull back the magic and it's too much and you don't want to hear it, then maybe this is the time to bow out. But I want to, get your reaction to Little Mermaid first. We'll talk villains last.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to break too much magic.
I don't either. But I do want to ask you a couple questions, specifically because I want your opinion. But first, tell me, as somebody that worked on this show in its original incarnation, what did you think?
I loved it. Plain and simple. I definitely love the original. There's something, I did that show for 15 plus years, and there's something about it that was very endearing to me. And I didn't know going into the show how I was going to feel about the new show. Knowing that they put a lot of technology into it and stuff like that, my thought was, did they just ruin it or supersize the show just to bring it into the show? Because let's face it, the show, when it closed for COVID, felt very early 90s. Watching the show, I loved it. My biggest complaint about the original Mermaid show in that theater, the original Voyage of the Little Mermaid show, was it was the highlights. There was no storyline. If you didn't know the movie, the Little Mermaid going into Voyage of the Little Mermaid, you didn't know what was going on. I felt you could know nothing about the movie going into this one, other than maybe the character names would help, but you know very little, and you could follow the story. The story of the movie, the storyline is there.
Yeah.
The technology was integrated very well. It wasn't about the technology. And that's always a fear I have with shows and rides, the attractions nowadays, is when they make it about the technology, when they have a piece of technology they want to use, so they design the attraction or the ride or the show around a piece of tech. And in this case, I felt like they found the tech that matched the vision, not made a vision around the tech.
Correct. I felt that. And you said the 90s thing, and I look at the Beauty and the Beast show now, and I'm like, that feels so 90s now.
Yes.
Because there's nothing about that is dynamic. And not that it needs to be, but it could, now that you know what they're capable of. Was there
Different type of show, though?
For sure. But you could still do backgrounds and set changes, and you don't have to.
Yeah.
But it certainly makes now these two new shows, in my opinion, make the Beauty and the Beast show feel slightly dated. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
I can agree with that, but I don't think it's a bad thing. And I believe, again, it's a different type of show.
Yeah.
Where that's okay. That's much more of a Broadway style.
But so is Little Mermaid.
I don't know if I would consider Little Mermaid a Broadway style. It's definitely a higher caliber than what we've seen in a lot of theme park shows before, but it is not I don't know. I just feel like it's a very different with all the sets are practical. Everything in there is live action. There's no projection. There's no...
Yeah, but when's the last time you saw a modern theater performance? I mean, imagine what they're up to these days. You know what I mean?
Well, even when you go to Broadway, it's still a lot of that.
But I remember seeing Peter Pan. Funny enough, I'm going to have this conversation with you. Frenchwoods, we did a winter trip to London.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was the camp director and everybody. We all went to London. And
I don't remember being invited to this one.
No, you weren't. And funny enough, I was down here in Windermere to start the trip off because I went with the camp director, went with Ron. But anyway, we did a whole bunch of West End theater. So this would have been 99, 98, 99. And they did a presentation of Peter Pan. Tinkerbell, and this is 99, Tinkerbell was a 3D laser hologram. And at that point in the equation, that was like jaw-dropping, right? The Lost Boys were diving in water on the stage, but the water was sheets and like fans, and they were obviously probably diving through the stage into crash pads kind of thing.
Right.
But to me, what I see with The Little Mermaid evoked that particular experience. I saw a blend of practical and technology, and oftentimes you couldn't tell where one stopped and one started.
I would 100% agree with that. I loved, the technology blended real well and how it jumped from one location to another, from projection to practical. Was a great blend of technology.
Was there like a big jaw on the floor moment for you or a big wow moment for you?
I don't know if there was a wow moment. I think it might be different for me than there was or would be for most people. The storm scene was definitely a very cool moment.
Very well done.
But the big musical number, Under the Sea, to me was the part that made me just kind of smile and giggle.
Yeah.
It was very well done, but that was the one where it invoked the original show.
So you felt like it was elevated?
It was elevated, but it was sort of that black light that we remember from the old show.
Do you feel like there were aspects of the old show that they retained?
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate on that or no?
I feel what I loved about it was what
a good friend am I? Look at how I structured that question for you.
Yeah. The puppets of the show,
right,
were definitely I don't know if they were reused or rebuilt,
So they
but
definitely captured the essence.
they were the same ones.
You think so?
Oh yeah. Whether the old ones may have been scrapped and rebuilt, but they at least from the audience from my point of view,
Same design kind of thing.
it was built the exact same way.
Dude, that Sebastian performer is a ham.
Yeah.
I was telling you that before we saw it. He's a ham.
More of a lobster than a ham, but.
All right. Well, it was really good to see you. We'll talk about villains never. Wow. Can't believe you just did that to me.
With all that you do to me, and you were gonna.
I know.
Go,
it's the perfect time for an ad break. It's time to spice up your kitchen with Pampered Chef. Pampered Chef has all the goodies from spatulas, mandolins, and amazing pots and pans, not to mention knives. Plus, don't miss out on small appliances like the deluxe air fryer and coffee maker. Spice up your kitchen today. Go to pamperedchef.com/PWS/Colleen Herman. pamperedchef.com/PWS/Colleen Herman. And with no estate plan, you could be leaving those you love the most with high taxes, probate fees, and an incomplete or divided estate and legal fights and fees. If you live in Florida, contact RK Law for a free consultation to discuss the options you have and the tools available to protect your home, savings, and estate for those you love the most. To get started, send an email to russell@rklawpro.com or call 786-566-2456 to set up your consultation today. That's russell@rklawpro.com. And if you're in the market for a 3D printer, visit flashforge.com. With printers starting at under $300, you can begin your 3D adventures today. Visit flashforge.com. And while you're online, head over to Etsy and the Theme Park Factory. The Theme Park Factory on Etsy is a great way to support this channel. Pick up a Joe Coconut and bring a little bit of the Theme Park Factory to your home. Oh, okay. So we're back. Remember, now imagine I don't put the ad in that break and I put it somewhere else in the podcast. So let's just talk without going too, I don't want to reveal too much of the special effects for people and all this. I see, and then we'll talk villains. I see a blend of Pepper's Ghost. I thought there was fog projections being used coming up from the bottom of the stage, what I would consider a laminar flow. If anyone can think of there was a version of the Pirates
laminar
ride.
flow is how water flows through pipe.
No, laminar flow is a fog flow. Laminar flow is like a bunch of basically like a grid of straws, and it's a laminar flow, and it creates a sheet of fog.
All right, moving on.
But it's called laminar flow. Go look up the product.
Okay,
Go look up the $10,000 fog screens. Do you think they're using those, or do you think that that's all scrim?
No, I don't think they're using it.
He said moving on.
It's a scrim.
The whole thing is a scrim,
yeah.
Top to bottom. So, yeah, because I kind of think I realized that today because the fog effect was too stable.
Yeah.
But when I'm like streaming.
And you wouldn't see through it. Now,
That's not true.
Not as clearly as you're seeing through it there.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of that Davy Jones effect.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. But it's for lack of a better term, and you're going to yell at me for saying this way, you're looking through, it's a foggy view through it.
Right.
This is a much clearer view.
But it's called laminar flow. Anyway, so total scrim. Is that Pepper's Ghost? Would you call a variant of Pepper's Ghost?
No, it's just a scrim effect. I mean, Pepper's Ghost is essentially Haunted Mansion, where you have an image, because a Pepper's Ghost is where you have an image over here off to the side. I'm pointing like you're
the radio, but that's cool.
But so Pepper's Ghost is where you have an image off to the side, and then you project that image onto glass or scrim or something like that, so that it appears to be a hologram or ghost effect.
Mm-hmm.
This I believe to be just, and again, not working on the new show, I would guess it to be more of just pure projection.
I'm smirking at him because and I know he's doing it for the benefit of the audience, but he's explaining to me what Pepper's Ghost is. But what I'm actually thinking is that how the technical part of my brain goes, well, all the difference would be is that the projector's hitting the scrim directly. If you bounce it off a mirror first, then it would be a variation of Pepper's Ghost.
Right, but Pepper's Ghost isn't using projection.
It can.
It's
using a source.
It's using light and a mannequin or an actual. It's not projecting. There's no projector in the sense of you're not using a slide or video projector. You're having light hit a physical object.
Do you remember when they did the Tupac hologram years ago?
Right.
And it was Pepper's Ghost. It was basically I'll say it was a projected image, but it was probably like a giant video screen onto a two-way mirror, truly. And then it was a 3D animated Tupac on like an alpha channel.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm getting at is do you and then we'll get to villains and have the same sort of conversation, but do you think that any of that is Pepper's Ghost that they're using?
No.
So it's just a scrim?
Yeah.
But from a technical geek perspective, you don't consider projecting on a scrim a Pepper's Ghost variant?
No, in this case, it's just a projection.
But you get the same desired end result.
To a point.
So, again, this is just a technical thing that I wanted to talk about with you, is it's amazing to me that Pepper's Ghost can still be utilized, or variants of it 200 years later are still being used.
Well, I think one of the things about using that technology, in all honesty, is because it's so old, people assume it's not being used.
And again, I know this is getting really, really geeky, but it's pretty much giving you the same result as Pepper's Ghost. So the only reason that
But it's a less complicated way to do it.
But it's almost a better effect.
You're not, because with Pepper's Ghost, you're bouncing stuff off mirrors or projecting it onto glass or scrims, whereas here it's just a straight projection. So as far as I can tell.
If we're using the Haunted Mansion as an example with the ballroom scene, you're basically the practical room, the two-way mirror, and the light source all now are a projector.
Essentially.
And then...
I mean, there is no projector in Haunted Mansion for the ballroom scene.
But I'm saying all of that is your source material, and it's being replaced by a projector. The projector is now doing the light, the mirror, and it's doing it all.
Yeah.
The throw and everything.
Right.
So, again, not trying to be argumentative, just being super geeky, I would argue that's a Pepper's Ghost technique they're using in the show. It's a modern-day version of Pepper's Ghost, because why would you do it the hard way? If I was building an arcade game today, I'd put a flat screen in it, not a CRT.
Right, and I'd have to look up, because there is actually a different name for it than Pepper's Ghost now, for what you're talking about. It's the same principle, but as you add the technology, I believe it's no longer called Pepper's Ghost. There's a newer name.
Oh, see, now I didn't know that. Now I'm really curious.
But
I can vamp if you want to look it up.
I could look it up while we're talking. But...
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I meant. But so, okay, all of that nerdiness to say, they are using so many layers because you have that scrim in the front. Then I think that there's a big video screen in the back, and then there's like a half screen to the side of the stage. And it's almost like they have this thing racked up like an animation stand, which is something that Walt created. But if you look at it, I mean, it is an animate. It is a series of layers on the stage. And when they do that storm sequence with the strobe light and the scrim, and then the actors are posing and they're doing these storm effects on top of the. I mean, it gives this desired effect. I mean, it is animated. It looks animated. You know, very well done.
It is.
What do you got? You come up with a name yet? Is it called Pepper's Ghost 2? The sequel, The Search for More Money?
There is 9,000 different answers. I'm trying to figure out which one's the right one
that's
versus
fine.
The Wikipedia one.
But it's just kind of remarkable that they can take something so antiquated and still modernize it.
Yeah.
And I think that just speaks volumes to how you don't have to go over the top. And for me, and we'll use this as a transition to get into the villains conversation, then we'll wrap this up. For me, what made The Little Mermaid so special was that it kept the essence of a theatrical performance, and the technology.
Just to give you the answer, I don't see the more modern name, but all of the definitions of Pepper Ghost it would be an indirect projection.
Okay.
So if we're talking a projector hitting a screen, then that's not a Pepper's Ghost.
But that goes
it would have to bounce off something before the audience sees the image.
Which is such a technical difference. But it's still, the desired effect is the same, and it's just the way they're doing it in this show with the layers. Like, to go back to that, is it really does feel like you're looking down on an animation stand.
Right. 100%.
You know? And you have that one side on the right-hand side of the stage where like Triton and Ursula are, that looks like a sliding video wall.
Right.
And then the Ursula practical effect. And now that I saw it without like a phone in front of my face, I could digest some of the transitions a little bit more. But the average eye There's no way people are going to be able to tell the difference.
No.
I just was absolutely. So, do you think that represents a new way of storytelling for the theatrical performances across the park?
I think it does. And what I'm glad about, and I know you've talked about this, you and I have definitely talked about it off mic, and every podcaster and streamer has mentioned it. And I'm sure most of your listeners have mentioned it and definitely heard it to death, where new attractions are screens.
Yeah, that was the fear.
And I think we're starting to get away from that a little bit. And I think we're starting to use now screens as a backdrop to physical sets. So you can have a room that's maybe 30 feet deep, but feels 200 feet deep because the back wall is that screen. And I think that's kind of what they did with this.
Well, it's supplemental.
Right. Thank you. I was trying to think of the word. It's the supplemental. But where what they did here is they did that on the back wall, but then on the front wall, essentially, they did a see-through wall that they could project on the scrim.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and you think that scrim stays on the whole show? It's there the whole time?
It looks like it does, yeah. The original one, I know the scrim came in and out. It rolled up into the upper areas of the stage when it wasn't being used. This one looks like it's permanently affixed to its location.
So what you just said, though, about the screen thing was my concern to move on to villains, was my concern with villains. And I think the difference between The Little Mermaid and Villains was that The Little Mermaid preserves a theatrical experience. Villains, to me, feels more like an install, like something out of a Meow Wolf, in terms of a next-gen, immersive experience, which I think is really, really promising for Villains Land. I thought I was going to despise the show. From all the concept art, I thought they were just reframing the video screens from Lightning McQueen.
That was a fear of mine originally.
And it is just mind-blowingly fun. It is just rowdy. It is, I think it is the perfect blend of villainous, but friendly enough, but scary. They just walk the line.
I love because it's not dark.
It's dark enough.
Right. And when I say it's not dark, I mean
lighting.
No, it's not what I mean. It's more of, it's not scary. It's not dark as in it's not scary.
Oh.
It's there for the whole family. It's not an adult show or something like that. It's not designed to scare kids. And I know some people are upset about that and feel the villains need to be dark and creepy, and maybe that's
I felt like they were vaudeville dark, though, like they were raunchy, like in a good way.
Yeah, kind of. And I kind of hope Villains Land is a cross. I'd like to see Villains Land a little bit creepier, more, Enchanted Forest, or not Enchanted Forest, sort of creepy foresty, and which is what the concept art kind of gives.
Like more Into the Woods-esque.
Into the Woods, more Maleficent Castle.
But not dark, and not that I've done Epic, but not dark to the extent of what they're doing with Monsters, where
not
it's
Dark Universe or something like
real.
That now. Yeah.
So do you think that
But it is Disney and it's Magic Kingdom, so I feel like, or for Villains Land, I know we kind of got off the villain show for a second. It needs to be villainous. It needs to be dark, but it needs to be family friendly.
But do you think that this villain show is basically the jumping off point for that tone?
I do. It's a little bit more on the happy side than I would like to see Villains Land.
Interesting.
But it is perfect for the show it is. And I think it's perfect because anyone from, a little kid to an adult and teens, it will love the show. I love the interactiveness of it, where the ending is decided by the crowd reactions. I love, and again, I don't want to give too much away because with the show being less than a month old, I'm sure many of the listeners haven't seen it yet. So, but there's alternate endings depending on crowd response. It's the whole show's narrated by the Evil Queen's mirror, and there's a sort of a sing along part.
Now it's not a sing along.
It's not a sing along,
should be, because that song is so good,
right? And I'm going to stick with my phrase of it's a sing along part, but it's not a sing along like Follow the Bouncing Ball or something like that sing along.
No, but
it's sort of the mirror says a line, and then ask everybody to complete that line.
Well, it's an interactive show, yes, but I guess what I'm saying is I almost wish that they would take it that step further, that people were up in their seats and like being rowdy with it,
Right.
because it's giving me Rocky Horror vibes in a great way.
And I kind of wonder if it was intentional that it wasn't done that way.
Well, I think it's probably easier to turn over a show if it's not that,
Yeah.
because you can't really get that kind of energy of a crowd out quick enough.
Right.
It's just too chaotic.
Yeah, and that show, like the Mermaid show and others, runs pretty much back to back. I mean, it reloads the theater within minutes of it emptying on most of their performances.
So we didn't see that today. I've seen that several times. You had seen
I've
that.
seen it several times, yeah.
So what is your wow moment there when you saw it the first time?
I had a couple. I think my first, honestly, the whole thing was a wow moment to me. Mermaid, when you walk in, the proscenium is different, but the room itself is the same.
Mm-hmm.
When you walk into Villains, I truly thought I was going to walk in and to just a rethemed version of the cars. I thought they ripped out that center where
black benches.
I was picturing the wooden benches. It's very nice, comfortable seating.
Mm-hmm.
I was picturing them had ripped out the center thing where Lightning was, and they just put a stage up, and it was going to be it wasn't a full 360, but was it a 180? I think cars was of screens.
Yeah.
I was thinking they were just going to redo those and maybe put frames around those screens.
I thought they were just going to put frames in front of them and sort of like mask them.
And you walk in there, and again, I don't want to give too much away, but it's a very, would you call it vaudeville looking theater, right?
Yeah.
It's got the big bulbs that are kind of flickering like the old signs on Broadway and stuff like that.
You feel like you're walking into an underground theater kind of vibe.
It feels kind of dingy and run down.
Yeah.
But intentionally like I say that, but it doesn't feel like Disney neglected it. I want to say it's almost Haunted Mansion-esque in the sense of it's very well maintained, but the image was that it's dingy and run down.
This is what I got walking into it.
So that to me was a wow moment. And then as the show progressed, one of the things I loved was the deep cuts. So there's all these mirrors all over the proscenium.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about there's only 3 live performers in the show. But on the mirrors, they show images of some villains that are just so
well done.
It's so well done, and it's not necessary.
I don't even want to talk about who they are because I don't want to ruin it for people.
I don't want to ruin it, but your traditional villains are there.
Yeah.
But then there is villains from movies that you just don't think of. And I'm not just talking like, oh, it's a Gaston or, something like that, but like...
I'll say it, Little John.
Little John was there, yeah.
And it's not, I'm not saying that it's like a big moment, but it's just sort of they pay homage to these characters.
Yes.
Classic. Not like Darth Vader.
Correct. No, and as you say that, I'm thinking about it, I don't think there's any Marvel or Lucasfilm elements in there.
Disney films.
It's all Disney and Pixar. There's some Pixar, I think, want to say in there.
I don't think there's Pixar in there.
Was there no Pixar?
I don't believe there was.
I thought there might have been, but I could be wrong on that.
So this is what I was going to say.
Also, the lines between Disney and Pixar the last few years have been so blurred.
But you can blame Iger for that because...
Well...
Yeah, but that's because that was the whole direct-to-video thing, and that's a whole other podcast. Because they much like they did with the Muppets, Disney does this Disneyification of things, and now Pixar has become Disneyfied to the point that Pixar doesn't even look like Pixar. That's a different conversation.
I was about to say, that's all different.
What I was trying to get at is when I walked in there, what I saw when you talk about walking into seeing vaudeville, what I saw was a black box theater that had been given all the tech bells and whistles for a palette of options that could then be used in villains.
Yes.
So I'm looking at it like this is just scratching the surface of potential, and this is an opportunity to play and test with all this new tech.
I do wonder if this is not necessarily a test of the tech, but a test of the villains themselves.
In terms of like how to present them, how to
present them. Do we make them that happy vaudeville-ish? Do we keep them dark and creepy? Do we, Captain Hook's a great example because we see him in different iterations throughout the years and throughout the different locations in the parks. And which iteration do we use of him? Um,
Well, that was interesting. Not to go too deep into it, but kind of with Cruella, they kind of took their own take on it because she's kind of very modern.
yes.
But
And I kind of wonder if are we taking the villains out of their timeline and bringing them to present day? Or are we leaving them in their timeline? Because that either way presents problems, but the movies all take place in such different timelines. Forget different universes. They take place everywhere from the 1900s.
But they solved all that with one song in this show. That's what's remarkable.
But I think
the premise is there.
But the premise of we need to figure this out before we build a whole land based on them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that's where I'm looking at this show and going, this show is almost the origin story for Villain's Land.
Yes.
Because everybody breaks through the mirror.
Correct.
And now we're in the land together.
Correct.
So then do they move the show over? Who knows? I don't know if you even want to comment on that because you may know something. I don't know what you
I know nothing.
But okay, well, I could have told you that.
No, I know nothing.
What would you do if you were in charge? Would you keep that show in Hollywood studios or would you bring it over? Because by the time you bring it over, it's going to be stale. So why bring a stale element?
I would not bring the show over, but I don't know if I'd keep the show.
Interesting take.
So of course, not knowing a Villain's Land is going to actually be.
Right.
But we're looking at what, 5 years before it opens?
Easily.
Right?
Probably longer.
But I think I saw somewhere, I could be making this up, but I thought I saw somewhere that they're looking at a projected 2030 opening.
Yeah.
I don't know why that date is stuck in my head. And
I had 2027 in my head, but there's no way that's happening.
Right.
That's way too soon.
So let's say 2027. Let's just pick the easier, the closer date.
Yeah.
That means 3 years. That's 3 years of the show. You open Villain's Land. If we do it in 3, I say I would personally, if I was Iger or Jeff Volley, president of Disney World, say, fine, let the two overlap for a year. And then you close Villains, you put something else in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say something that's kind of controversial. You make it a Muppet theater. I've said this before. You're going to get plenty of hate mail for me saying this.
I don't read my mail, so it's
but I am glad. I hate that Muppets has left. I am glad Muppets 3D is gone. I think it was old and outdated to a point. I would love. You're giving me a look, and let me finish what I'm saying.
I'm not saying a word.
No. I just see that look in my eye.
I just did it for the fun.
Muppets 3D was old and outdated. We needed to modernize it. We needed to come up with something new. I agree with you. You've said it before. I don't remember if we said it in this particular episode of the podcast, where Disney has kind of Disney-fied the Muppets too much. But I would like to see whether it was a new 3D movie, whether it's live action, I'd like to see the Muppets do something new in the parks. And I think that theater could be the best place to do it. You make, Rock and Roller Coasters becoming a Muppet ride.
But why are you moving Muppet Land across the park? You had Muppet Land. You could have.
You do, and I'm pissed that they got rid of it. That's why I said I'm not upset we got rid of the movie. I'm upset that we got rid of the land, and I think the movie just needs to be updated. If it was my world, the movie would have closed, and 6 months later, a new show would be in that theater.
Yeah, I would have said update the show, and then
whether it was a movie or a live action or something else, it's a beautiful theater that you could have done plenty with,
and then build a Muppet coaster back where they're building the Monster Inc. coaster. But they're not.
Or you don't necessarily need a Muppets coaster. You could have built a Muppets ride.
But I'm even saying that right. But because we're getting a Muppet coaster anyway, I'm just saying that you could have literally. In other words, what you're suggesting is rebuild Muppets on the other side of the park, and it makes no sense to rebuild something that you already had.
It doesn't. But let's face it, we do a lot of things at Disney that don't make sense.
But that's because they're not.
Let's
planning.
Add on to the list.
But that's because they're not planning. There's no thematic integrity anymore. They're not looking at it like a theme park. They're looking at it like an amusement park. So now things are being done. And again, you don't need to comment if you don't want to, but they're doing things based off of what's convenient. They're doing things based off of reactive measures. And the last thing that comes into play is story.
Right. I'm going to not comment on that too much because I do feel that is a perspective that we have. and I'll agree with that to a point, but I also feel there's a lot of market research that goes into it.
I don't disagree with that, but here's what I'll say. If you're ripping out Muppets, let's just work with the premise that you're ripping out Muppets. Why wouldn't you consider at least trying to bridge Star Tours to Galaxy's Edge and bring some cohesion in there? I understand
100%.
the arguments for why you can't go too deep beyond Animation Courtyard, and we don't have to have that conversation, okay? But the Animation Courtyard sits there. So
that's where Monsters should have been built, in my opinion.
And then it could connect it to Toy Story, and you could have had a Pixar arc behind the park.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. And the thing is, they still don't know what they're going to do with the Animation Courtyard. And they actually, I think they know what they're going to do now. And I'm going to tell you what my guess is. And you can also not comment. But when I first started streaming, I was talking to cast members over at Launch Bay when Launch Bay was reopened. And they were like, we don't know. We know we need to do something with it, but nobody knew. So I firmly believe up until the last minute, it was Monsters may go in the Animation Courtyard and it may go to Muppets, and it really came down to the wire. And that's not the way to run a theme park.
True. I also, I've said this to you before, concept art that's released is very deceiving intentionally.
But that doesn't solve the location decision.
No. But I think they know more than they're going to say. Everyone's like, oh, it was put here. They listen to the blogs, they listen to this and that. And although Disney does to a point, my gut is when that concept art was released, they knew exactly where it was going.
Yeah, but they made it look like it could have been Animation Courtyard at first purposely. And I think, by the way, they did that with Rivers. I think that they said, let's release the worst case scenario artwork so that people get so bent out of shape that by the time we show them what we want, they're happy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's purposely upset the apple cart so we can manage the expectations. Because if we show them what we really want, then they'll be miserable.
There's definitely a certain amount of design that doesn't happen until construction has already started.
Well, I mean, we still don't know what Villains is getting.
And what we don't know, I actually, one thing I will say that bothers me about Disney that I think Universal does better is stop releasing the concept art so early. Stop talking about your plans. Because how many things has Disney shown concept art for or talked about, and then for one reason or another, it doesn't happen?
Well, they would never. They would have never released a piece of Blue Sky concept art as a land expansion. There was a time that would have been a Blue Sky concept, and it's it.
Right.
And they would have gotten a full presentation. So there's a huge problem with that. The fact that Villains Land is being marketed with a piece of concept art is bizarre to me.
Right.
The same with Piston Peak. And their latest piece of concept art is completely different from the prior, both stylistically.
Yeah, it's a very cartoonish piece of artwork, which
it looks like a placemat.
Right, which is kind of a cool look, but
that's a park map graphic, not. That's what I'm saying. Like,
I will say the new concept art got me more excited for it than I was when they announced it. I hated the idea of where it was going when it started, when they announced it. I like it now. The water feet, you and I said it. I said it to you originally, and not that you disagreed. I said Rivers America is not going away. It will be altered. It'll be changed, but I can't imagine it going away. And this new piece of concept art shows that it's no longer a full circle river, but it is the front half of that river is still there.
But in the original piece of concept art, which again was Blue Sky, and it was all, you want to talk about a smoke screen of, we were making the joke about the smoke screen haze. That's all that concept art is, like a smoke screen of haze. Mm-hmm. There's literally this fog in all of the art that you can't really see things by design. But in that original art, that was all street. There was no water.
Yeah.
And they added the water back in. And I think they purposely went from photorealistic Blue Sky to cartoon drawing, because then you can't do a one-to-one comparison.
It's possible. And I mean, there was permits that got denied, and they were, this was all public information. There were permits that got denied and pushed back and stuff like that from the Central Florida Tourism District, or whatever they're called now, the former Riddy Creek people, and from the EPA and everything else. Because remember, those are huge bodies of water that, even though it's essentially, Rivers America is a cement canal, it does, get watched by things like EPA and stuff, because the water gets drained out and filtered through actual drainage canals. And So yeah, I think a lot of that water, the idea that it's now, it's part of Frontierland always confused me. I was like, why aren't they just putting it? That should be the land expansion behind Frontierland or behind Thunder, and Villains should have been put where Tom Sawyer's Island was, because Mansion sort of becomes your entrance. I think maybe that's the reason it wasn't done. They didn't want Mansion to become part of Villains Land accidentally. But it becoming the fact that the theme of it is a national park.
Yeah.
I can't remember I was reading an article, and I don't want to talk about where I read the article, because I don't want to start mentioning other podcasts and other everything else on here. But the main character, who I'm blanking on the name of, the park ranger,
Mm-hmm.
he is referenced in other actual source material from Cars land, from the Cars movies.
But I think it's a throwback to a classic Disney thing too.
I believe it is as well. But I like the fact that he is there's sort of this tie to it. It's a national park is what they're kind of trying to go for, which is Thunder Mountain is based out of Bryce Canyon, and Splash Mountain and all that kind of, or now Tiana's, which is a weird.
It fits more in the second piece of art than the first piece did.
Yes.
First piece was very, very out of place. They also announced that this whole thing was originally beyond Big Thunder Mountain. So this goes back to the reactionary panic construction of it all, and then we'll wrap this up. Because just like we were talking about with Muppets and Hollywood Studios, I firmly believe they were originally going to go beyond Big Thunder Mountain. And then things change, and then it was like, well, we already have operational Tom Sawyer issues, so let's kill two birds.
Yeah, I think that, but I also think it's possible, and I really don't know, but I think it's possible that Cars Land and Villains Land, because Villains is going beyond Thunder, is all one project called Beyond Big Thunder. The construction is all being happening at the same time.
But when they announced it, they announced Encanto. They were going to put Encanto behind Big Thunder Mountain. So it's again.
But were they ever going to, like, that's.
No, but I'm just saying they're not.
Because I actually looked that up the other day. Encanto, there was never concept art. There was never anything with Encanto back there. That was a lot of. They announced that they're going to talk about doing Encanto. Disney never officially said anything about that going to Magic Kingdom.
No,
so
when they did the D23 Beyond Big Thunder, they had floated the idea of Encanto going beyond Big Thunder Mountain.
I don't remember that. Maybe, but I don't remember that being announced there. I just remember that being announced.
But Blue Sky has been reduced to words, right. And now concept art is Blue Sky. Well, you know what I'm trying to say,
right? At least the good news is on the South Americas, Tropical Americas rather. Sorry, yeah. The Tropical Americas area at Animal Kingdom, the Beyond Big Thunder, both Villain and Cars Land construction is starting. Not as much with Cars yet. We have a closing date for Tom Sawyer's Island, but cranes are there, construction vehicles are there.
Yeah, we saw that today.
Right. Earth is moving.
Oh, so, it's wild.
Yeah. So while
at a very, very fast rate,
we may be months, if not a year, away from seeing anything go vertical. Stuff is happening, and the thing that a lot of people forget is how much has to happen before the first piece of steel can go up, before anything can go vertical. And especially with expansions like Beyond Big Thunder, you're talking about, think about all the infrastructure that's needed that has to go underground, from sewers to electrical to pipes and
they won't extend the utilidors, right?
They won't extend utilidors, because utilidors don't even go into Frontierland now.
Right. So you could come off the back of Fantasyland if you wanted to.
But you still need you're still taking an area that's currently a parking lot and trailers and putting a land there.
Yeah, I just don't think they'd spend the money to do it.
No. I'm not saying utilidors, but you still need to run sewer lines. You still need to run, because it's going to be a very different sewer usage from a couple of construction trailers and and one small office building to a theme park. Different water usage, different rides versus an office, very different electrical use.
And just because we drove past that earlier, and this may not gel with most people listening, but they're not going to pipe that drainage stuff into the park. They're going to go across the street to where all that stuff is by where we were pointing out where they might move things over. We were talking about the roads and all that. And if you look across the street there where they're digging up everything by the golf course, that's where all the drainage went for the new DVC.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to different locations, and
But I'm just saying, you're not going to add into the park that's already maxed out in terms of infrastructure.
Right.
You have to add new infrastructure.
Correct.
And then you're going to wind up bringing back of the house deeper into things. And now, because all the waste management in Disney World is on the other side of that road. It's deeper back there,
Yes.
but it's back there. So that's where everything needs to go. It's crazy to think about that stuff.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that really intrigues me.
Yeah, and the stuff that
Dropping all those pipes in the ground.
And then you have to think about all the other stuff is, what's in that concept art is all the stuff that the guests see. What you never see is all the cast member access points. You need emergency vehicle access points. So you need gates. How does equipment get in and out? And I'm not just talking construction, but every night, how do the maintenance vehicles get through?
I'm thinking about how waste gets out.
Yeah, I mean, but everything, like, forget even things like the waste and stuff, because that's all underground piping. I'm talking about, like, once the land is finished.
Yeah, but
think about what it takes to run it.
No, but I'm thinking about, like, so I remember when we were like designing the arcade and we were like, oh, like we're going to have this many people, and there was rules, right? There's code. There's code. It's called code, not rules. But you'd be like, oh, we're going to have this many people, and then, okay, there's a bathroom, and for this many people, you need to have a bathroom, and then there's a bathroom. Okay. So with villains, let's just look at it like a land expansion for a second, forget the theme. I'm going to add X amount of restaurants, and I'm going to have X amount of restrooms in the restaurants, and then I'm going to have X amount of restrooms in the land. So now I have to add plumbing for X amount of capacity.
Correct.
And now I have to add drainage for that. And I'm like, that's like city planning.
Yeah.
How do you know how wide your sewage out needs to be to accommodate the influx of waste?
Right.
Like, that's where my mind goes. Because if you were building a park from scratch, it would be so much more expensive. Now you're ad hocing park infrastructure into
it's
something.
Actually, I think the opposite. I think if you were building the park from scratch, prospectively, it's cheaper. Now, granted, it takes a lot more money to build a park from scratch than
and to operate
than it does to expand. However, now you're retrofitting. So think about it. Fantasy or Frontierland opened in late 70s. I know it wasn't originals of the park. Everything has changed. Codes have changed. And as soon as you start, and now you have that, again, you start talking about the domino and ripple effect, right? So look at it from a construction point of view. The minute you start touching that piping, anything that meets code from let's call it 1980. I don't remember when Frontierland opened. Let's use a nice round number, 1980. Everything that was to code 1980 now is brought up to 2025 code.
That's why you don't touch it. So what you're doing,
but now you have to touch it because you have to bring in that new land.
Or you don't touch it, and everything is basically operating separately on top of it, and it's like having a cyst on top of the park operationally, because it's almost going. If I'm looking at what's going on back there, just from every day that I drive past it, they're gutting that swampland.
Oh yeah.
So if you're going to do all that, you're not piping into existing Magic Kingdom infrastructure. You're building new infrastructure.
Right.
So it is like building a new park, but it's a tiny little park versus now we got to build a fifth gate, and we got to staff it, and we got to power it, and we got to maintain it.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a couple shops, a couple restaurants.
Which you still have to staff, you still have to maintain.
It's a lot easier. The bigger concerns is power, water, sewage. Really?
Yeah.
Everything else that goes on top is show.
Sort of, yeah.
I mean, we've just really made theme parking very boring. I find it very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, project management is my, what my master's is in. Like, this is what I love doing. What I love,
this is the stuff you and I talk about.
Yeah, I mean, my master thesis was literally on crowd control of a theme park.
Okay, so let's end on that then. You're talking about the idea of adding land expansion is for capacity.
Correct.
In your opinion, does the Magic Kingdom have a capacity issue?
It can. I think part of the capacity issue that the Magic Kingdom has right now has been brought on by itself. But that's also why. So think about this real fast. I'll give you the real boring details real fast, right? Your capacity is based on square footage available to people. So if you think about, especially pre-COVID, when rides like Carousel of Progress were only open seasonally, well, why do you open Carousel of Progress seasonally? Well, it seats X hundred of people plus the queue line. That's 200 or 300 people in the queue line. So let's say I don't know the numbers, but let's say Carousel of Progress, if it's running at full capacity, can hold 1,000 people. It's probably way over that, but let's call it 1,000 people. Let's say the line can hold another 500 people. So that's 1,500 people that we can put in the park. If that ride's closed, that's 1,500 people less than because you don't have that square footage now. That's 1,500 people less that are allowed in the park. So for every attraction, every show, every ride that you have open, that is that many more people you can let into the park. If you have something that's closed, that cuts the capacity by that much.
So looking at Tom Sawyer Island, looking at Rivers of America, which has capacity.
It does.
Even if it's not being used, the capacity is there.
Correct.
But you're saying that that's nullified because it's not active, theoretically. I'm not saying you're saying that, but you're inferring that.
To a point. But also, again, if you want to start talking that, here's your problem. And it goes back to what we were just talking about, bringing things up to code, right? Tom Sawyer's Island opened in 1971 with the park.
Right.
So forget that it's not relevant to today's guests for the most part, because most kids do not know who Tom Sawyer's Island is.
Yeah, no, now we're just purely talking operations.
Right. But you have this massive piece of land that, let's face it, needs a lot of work.
Okay.
Even if you want to keep it Tom Sawyer's Island, it needs to work. Well, the minute you touch it, you have to bring it up to code.
Mm-hmm.
What on Tom Sawyer's Island is ADA accessible?
None of it.
Right. So now you have to bring that whole island up to ADA standards.
Okay.
What's that construction cost? Versus for a piece or for an attraction that is not popular. Versus not clearing it and building something that's popular.
You're taking me right where I want to go, because then I agree. But then you add in this off-roading cars attraction.
Correct.
It is not a 4-quadrant ride. It does not appeal to grandma. Grandma is not getting in that thing. That is a ride that is not going to be for little ones. So that ride is going to appeal to, let's just make up a number, half, okay, of your people.
Okay.
All right. Now, Magic Kingdom, busiest time of year, summer.
Correct.
What does it do every day?
Summer and Christmas, yeah.
What does it do every day in the summer?
Rains.
And?
Lightning.
Now suddenly, your new attraction, which is supposed to offset capacity, doesn't speak to everybody in the park, so it's got limited access or limited accessibility, limited interest. And then it's got the potential to go one-on-one all the time because of the nature of the attraction. So now, how much capacity are you really creating? It's not how many problems are we really solving, or are we just creating new problems?
Well, but I think when you look at capacity, they don't care who it appeals to. If that line, that's why everything's theoretical capacity. Tom Sawyer's Island slows the theoretical capacity, but if you want to look at operational, it can't be. They have to close it in weather. It's still an outdoor attraction, so it goes down whenever there's lightning.
Right. So that kind of wipes that out.
Anyone in a wheelchair, crutches, anything like that, scooter, any of that kind of stuff, can't go out there really. I mean, you can get out there, but you can't go anywhere. You leave the dock and you're pretty much already up on a staircase.
So make up a number. Let's say Tom Sawyer Island's got a capacity of 1,000, which it doesn't.
I mean, it's got to be much higher than that. But yeah, 1,000 is a nice even number.
Okay, but even if it did have more than 1,000, the weight of the people would sink the island. Okay, so let's just say 1,000's the high end.
Right.
All right. And now they put in this cars ride. And let's say, just playing with the Carousel of Progress numbers, that when that ride is operating at capacity, even though this is going to be way too high of a number, but let's just say that it's 1,500. When the queue is full, it's 1,500. Okay, so now it's in theory got more capacity. All right, so now we got 1,500 people in the line for this new cars ride. It goes 101. Where the hell are those 1,500 people going?
But now also think operationally, you don't have to boat them all off an island.
But they weren't on the island before. They were at the resort. They were elsewhere because that option wasn't being utilized. They were already dispersed elsewhere. This is why I think the Magic Kingdom doesn't have a capacity issue. I think the biggest issue that the Magic Kingdom has is that there are things like Stitch's Great Escape sitting there dormant,
Yes.
taking up space where capacity is waiting to be utilized. And if you wanted to solve the Tom Sawyer Island issue, you could have landlocked Tom Sawyer Island and kept it as an active play space. So I look at this now, this new Piston Peak artwork. I don't see any car vehicles. And I just wonder, are they like, oh, maybe we just need to make this more like the Redwood Creek over in California Adventure, the little play space. Like maybe they're realizing like, hey, we just need to landlock Tom Sawyer Island and preserve the Wilderness Explorer vibe and not add an attraction that is going to create more problems than good.
Well, I think the attraction will still be there. I think there's 2 attractions going in that land.
Yeah.
There's the Doom Buggy one, and then there's supposed to be a family friendly one,
Which will just be like a flat ride
most likely.
stock thing.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's like Maters or something. If
Right,
they bring
exactly.
something like that over. I honestly, and I don't know. This is not inside information.
No, but that's, I mean, it's good.
but-
It's Alien Swirling Saucers. It's Baymax Happy Ride. I mean, it's what Disney does now. Couple rides, couple shop, e-ticket stock.
Right.
So it's not.
But not every ride needs to be an e-ticket either.
No, but you would make, it is an e-ticket because it's.
No, but I'm saying like the Doom Buggy is your e-ticket, and your flat ride can be your B or C ticket.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, not every ride we build has to be an e-ticket.
No, I'm saying, but the recipe these days is one e-ticket, one C ticket, couple of shops, couple restaurants, and that's a land.
And if you kind of look at back in Walt's day, is it that much different?
No, it just had better thematic integrity across those lands. Now each land is just like a little slice of IP.
Right.
That's the difference. That's where Epic Universe is basically a better version of Hollywood Studios. Because Epic does not, even on paper, does not gel thematically.
Right.
You can make up all the BS stories about Chronos, this and that.
And Epic Universe has the same issues when it goes to Lightning. I think they only have 4 rides in the whole park that can operate in rain.
So all of that to say is that when you look at the fact that like people go, oh, well, the Magic Kingdom has capacity issue, I just go, are they really solving it? Is this Cars thing really the answer?
For that, I'm going to say the same thing I said for Skyliner and a few other attractions. I want to wait till it opens before I pass my true judgment. And to jump in the Wayback Machine, Skyliner, everyone was saying how horrible this was going to be when they were starting to build it, when they announced it. It is the most popular and highest guest satisfied mode of transportation right now.
The Skyliner's an omnimover. Okay.
Essentially.
Okay. So maybe the key with this Cars thing is instead of it being these free trackless off-roading vehicles, maybe it needs to be more of an omnimover-esque experience or more like a dinosaur Indiana Jones ride system that has a higher capacity to keep.
And we don't
people
know.
moving.
I mean, none of us know what the capacity is yet. None of us know how.
I don't think they know.
Possibly not. I mean, the ride's still in design, right? So how often does a vehicle get dispatched? How many people? The concept art, I think, shows 6 people in a vehicle. Is it 4 or 6 people in a vehicle?
It looked like 6.
So
I mean, the vehicle looked similar to a dinosaur vehicle.
So it could be a very similar capacity to Test Track.
Yeah.
Which is actually a pretty high capacity ride.
Right.
A lot of that's going to dictate how fast vehicles are dispatched out of the station.
But that's a track ride, as soon as you. So here's the thing. Not that it's going to be real off-roading. So let's just say it's trackless. So now we're introducing another variable. And if it's a trackless in the spirit of the other trackless attractions, it's going to go down a lot.
Possibly. I don't know if it's trackless in that sense. I know it appears to be trackless. Is it a true trackless?
Or is it just like GPS vehicles?
Right. Is it GPS? Well, that's essentially what trackless is running. But is it?
Yeah, but it's RFID.
But the idea is, or is it following a buried track, like a sort of a universe of energy where there's a copper line,
like a guide wire,
a guide wire underneath that you just can't see? There's so many variables that we don't know.
Yeah, but these are the things that speak to the real operational concerns and the things that speak to actual capacity issues.
Right. But we don't know doesn't mean they don't know.
I understand that, but this goes back to the idea of there used to be a time where we would have known by now because, you've already broken ground. And you would have getting, I'm not to say it wouldn't have changed,
Right.
but even when they did Avengers Campus, you had insight to what the rides were going to be. What we're getting here is like they're just changing it as they go, which is fine, but then don't present it to people until you have.
Well, and that goes back to my earlier comment where I think Disney releases concept art too early.
But if you remember, even Walt would say it all the time. And we're going to wrap this up because this is way longer than I wanted to go. Walt would stand there in front of the map at Epcot and go, "This is it today. It's going to change 100 times."
Mm-hmm.
So that's not the problem. Okay. The problem is there's no thought being put into some of these decisions the way Walt did it.
Right.
Walt would change things because things would dictate change. They're changing things because they're panicking and they're reacting. And you don't have to comment on that. But I think if you look at the amount of construction that is going on Walt Disney World property right now, it is highly reactive and it is quite a bit of panic construction.
Yeah.
I said you don't have to comment.
Yeah.
But then I also just wanted to watch you like flail. It's you don't have to comment.
I have my opinions about it. But
it's inevitable.
I'm not. Yeah. And I don't think it's necessarily panic over Epic Universe like a lot of people say. Or anything
I don't
like
think it's panic over Epic. I think it's panic over the future of the company.
But I'm just not gonna comment on that.
But there is so actually then because you just said Epic, well, I'll let you end it with this. People want to pit the two against each other. Like there's this competition,
right?
And there's some really unintelligent people on Twitter that get a lot of attention and be like, "Guys, I told you the two biggest billion-dollar companies in the world. You're going to say they don't compete?" I'm like, "You just said they're the two biggest billion-dollar company." Like then obviously they don't need to compete because they both have deep, deep pockets. They complement, they supplement, and they work together because they have a shared interest in preserving the theme park tourism community of Orlando.
Yeah. There's definitely a competition, but I think the competition is way exaggerated by the customer than it is the reality.
Especially when it's the same people who go do a show at Disney and then go hop over to Universal and then come back to Disney. You're competing with yourself.
Yeah.
It's literally competing with yourself.
Yeah. And, I think Epic Universe, people are like, oh, Epic Universe is put Disney out of business or whatever. And the reality is, no, it's bringing more people down to Central Florida.
Correct.
And maybe what's happening is people were coming down for 7 days and spending 5 at Disney and 2 at Epic or at Universal, and maybe now they're coming down for 7 days and they're spending 3 or 4 at Universal and 2 or 3 at Disney. So maybe the priorities change, but both parks are still doing amazing attendance.
Yeah.
It's
everybody else in town. It's SeaWorld. It's Icon Park. These are the guys that are competing because they're trying to catch the scraps.
Right.
The fact that Universal can even be held in the same conversation as Disney is an achievement for Universal because they've come so far.
Yeah.
But there's that's what I find so toxic about the viewers.
I'd say the only time there was a true competition between the two was in 88, 89 when they were building their first park down here and we were building Hollywood, or what's now Hollywood, back then MGM Studios.
But and this is why these things go long, because you and I keep talking, because we love these topics and we're very good at keeping them going. That had more to do with the fact that Michael Eisner was privy to all that information from his time at Paramount, so it became an arms race.
Oh, 100%.
Because he was it was an ego-driven decision for him to do something that he couldn't do over at Paramount. Mm-hmm. I forget the nature of the deal. But the short version is, so then he gets to Disney and he goes, I'm going to beat Universal to the punch.
Right.
But those aren't creative decisions.
No. But on the other side of it, though, one of the things that drives change in both parks is what the other park's doing.
Correct. But
it won't let either park rest in its laurels. It makes sure that each park is constantly doing something.
That's how we got Galaxy's Edge, was because of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But again, it's not competition in if you had secrets from Universal, Disney would buy them. You ever hear the story of like the guy from Coca-Cola who tried to sell secrets to Pepsi?
Yeah.
And like Pepsi called Coke and was like, "You have a mole. Like we don't want we don't want your secrets. Like we work like."
Yeah.
Amazon and Netflix are not competitors, folks. Netflix is hosted on Amazon servers. Netflix is one of Amazon's biggest customers. Netflix is not going to, even though they might compete on paper, they don't compete in the boardroom.
Right.
Listen, thank you so much.
It's great being here.
I know that we probably jumped all over the place, which is fine. I know that there was some inside baseball that might have been a little too deep for some people, but I think there are some things you said that will really educate folks. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Again, these are your opinions. And I don't think
definitely.
You didn't say anything problematic.
I don't think I said anything, but yeah, everything that I said today, everything that you said, it was our personal opinions. None of this obviously represents the Walt Disney
opinions
Company.
Represent the company. I can say that. I don't work there.
Well, you don't work there. I do, so I got to be careful.
No, I'd like to work there again when you're running the place.
Nothing that we said today is obviously official from the company or anything else, and should not be taken that way.
I do want to say one thing. I hadn't planned on saying this, and this is self-serving. But you know more than anybody else how much I love this company. You will say to me privately, we'll talk about sort of the ecosystem and things, and we'll have these conversations. But you know that when it's all said and done, like even when I'm critiquing the company, it comes from the heart.
Oh, yeah.
And that I absolutely adore the Walt Disney Company and Walt Disney. And that is something that you and I have shared since being bunkmates in French Woods.
Yeah.
But it is, and I used to be so envious that you lived in Disney World. And now I do too.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
I definitely spend more time in the park than I do at home. So
hey, and you know what? It's always fun to run into a familiar face in the park.
Yeah.
And I think I saw you the other day. You ran past me, and I just texted you. I was like, "Oh wow, all right." Like you just ran right past me, and I was like, "I'll go follow him." And I was like, "I will definitely not go follow him because that's weird." But I definitely thought about it. I'm so proud of the things that you're doing at the park too, without getting into the specificity of it all. But I say on the live all the time that there are a handful of people I know that work at the company that still understand what it's all about, that really care about making things better, that care about the guest experience. And I look forward to the day where folks like you and the folks you work with and the folks that I have worked with are running this place, because you guys are the future of the company and you are the reason that I still hold out hope. So don't comment on that. Thank you all very much. Mike, thank you.
Thank you for having me, and look forward to coming back.
I'll see you at Animal Kingdom or wherever you work.